A secret letter from Princess Diana, hidden for nearly 3 decades, has just shaken the monarchy to its core. When Prince William read the final message his mother left behind, everything changed. And Queen Camilla was forced to step down. This isn't rumor. This is the royal truth, finally exposed. The discovery that changed everything. It was a quiet, gray morning at Kensington Palace, the kind where the walls feel like they're keeping their own secrets. Prince William had cleared his schedule to sort through old boxes, letters, photographs, and small pieces of his childhood that had been tucked away for decades. Most of it was harmless nostalgia. But at the bottom of an old leather journal, he saw something that made his heart stop. There it was, an envelope, its edges yellowed, marked in Diana's unmistakable handwriting. Across the back, in deliberate ink, were the words, "For William. When the time is right." His breath caught. For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't even blink. This was no ordinary keepsake. This was his mother speaking across time. The seal was still unbroken, like a boundary no one had dared to cross. The room went silent, even the archivist stepping back instinctively, sensing the change. William traced the edges with his thumb, remembering her laugh, her warmth, the way she always bent to meet his eyes when he was small. He felt her there, almost as if she were standing behind him. He turned the envelope over once, twice. The ink had faded, but the message had not. In that instant, the palace felt different, heavier, older. It was as if every secret it held was pressing in on him. William slid a finger under the seal. Slowly, carefully, he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the royal crest faint but visible at the top. The handwriting was slanted, elegant, hers. The first line read, "My darling William, if you are reading this, then I was right. The truth could not be kept from you forever." His chest tightened. This wasn't just a letter. This was a key, a message locked away for decades, waiting for this moment. Every word pulled him deeper into a story he thought he already knew. He could feel the weight of his mother's voice in the fibers of the paper. There was no one to interrupt him, no one to filter it. Only Diana, telling him exactly what she had wanted him to know when the time came. He folded the paper back, his hands trembling. "This changes everything," he whispered to the empty room. And he was right. Because the next lines of that letter weren't just about the past. They were about the present, and about the person now known as Queen Camilla. Not everyone who smiles beside you wishes you well. That was her warning. That was her truth. As William stared at the page, the sound of snow began to tap against the window pane. The palace held its breath with him. This was no longer just a private moment between a mother and her son. This was a spark, and he knew the fire was coming. And it leads directly to the next chapter, the one where Diana's voice reaches from the grave, not just to warn, but to reveal. Diana's voice from the grave. That evening, the palace was quiet, but William's mind was a storm. He had read the letter once in daylight. Now, alone in his study, he read it again, slower this time, letting each word settle like stone. Outside, the gardens were covered in a thin layer of snow. Inside, the fire cracked softly, throwing long shadows across the desk. The opening line stayed with him. "My darling William, if you're reading this, I was right." It wasn't just a greeting. It was a prophecy. Diana's words flowed with a calm strength, but beneath them was pain, fear, and foresight. She wrote about palace life as a stage, a place where smiles were rehearsed and kindness could be a weapon. She explained how power in those walls wasn't just in titles, but in whispers, in secrets, in control. Then came the part that made William's hands tighten around the paper. She named Camilla, not in passing, not as a footnote, but as a shadow. Her charm is a mask, Diana wrote. Beneath it lies a will as unyielding as stone. This wasn't gossip. This was a mother telling her son, years before it mattered, what he might one day face. William read on. She urged him to listen to his heart, to protect Harry, to remember that loyalty and love were not the same as duty. The crown may rest on one head, she wrote, but its weight is shared by those who love you. Her handwriting looped across the page, elegant and sure. But the words were heavy. Her final lines were the ones that felt like a blade. Not everyone who smiles beside you wishes you well. It was no longer a warning. It was a truth, written decades before, but landing now with precision. William sat back, staring at the letter. It wasn't just a message. It was a blueprint, a call to action from a woman who saw too much and was silenced too soon. He placed the letter on the desk, staring at it like it might move on its own. The palace corridors outside were silent, but he felt the world shifting beneath him. This was no longer just about him. This was about everything his mother had tried to protect. As the fire flickered, he whispered into the empty room, "I hear you, Mum." And in that whisper, a decision was forming. Because what came next would not be private. It would not be hidden. It would be a confrontation. And the first step was his father, King Charles. Alone with the truth. That night, long after the palace lights dimmed and the staff had retreated into silence, William remained seated at his desk. The letter was spread open again, the paper smooth beneath his fingertips, as if the act of touching it kept his mother close. He didn't read it this time. He studied it, line by line, word by word. Every sentence now felt louder, heavier, the kind of truth that doesn't whisper. It waits. He could hear her voice as he read, calm but urgent, like a secret spoken through time. Diana didn't write this as a farewell. She wrote it as a warning, something meant to guide him when she knew she wouldn't be there. It wasn't emotional. It was strategic. There were no rambles, no excess. Everything was placed deliberately. And it was clear she had always expected he'd read this when the stakes were high. She spoke of loyalty twisted into control. She described how the institution could change people, strip them of themselves, and how she feared it would happen to her sons. "Trust your instincts," she wrote, "and when they're loudest, don't silence them to keep the peace." William read that line 3 times. It stung, because he had spent years doing just that. She asked him to look after Harry, to protect him from being pulled under. "You will grow apart," she admitted, "but love does not require closeness. It requires defense." William sat back in the leather chair, eyes scanning the flames in the fireplace. He wasn't just reading anymore. He was reliving the spaces between her public smiles and private fears. Camilla's name returned, quietly but decisively. Diana never accused. She revealed. "You may be asked to welcome her," she wrote, "but know that not all acceptance is genuine. Some is performance." And then the words that echoed loudest of all, "The time will come when truth will knock. When it does, don't hide it. Open the door. William looked up from the paper. He already knew what needed to happen. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about anger. It was about his mother trusting him with this. The letter hadn't survived decades in silence just to be folded up again. He slid it back into its envelope, but not to hide it, to carry it. A choice had been made, quiet but final. And before the world would hear a word, his father would have to hear it first. The confrontation with King Charles. Clarence House was unusually still when William arrived. He came alone, in a dark coat, the envelope tucked securely in his inner pocket. There were no cameras, no press, just the kind of quiet that always came before something broke. He didn't ask for a meeting. He walked in. And when the aides saw his face, they didn't stop him. King Charles looked up from his desk, surprised, then concerned. "William?" he asked, his voice warm but cautious. The room was flooded with gold light from the setting sun. It looked peaceful. But peace wasn't why William had come. Without a word, he pulled the envelope from his coat and placed it gently on the desk. Charles froze when he saw the handwriting. He didn't ask whose it was. He knew. "Where did you find this?" he asked quietly. "In one of her journals," William replied. "It was meant for me. I've read it." The king stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. "And?" William's tone didn't rise, but the weight behind it did. She spoke about what really happened, about what she saw, and about Camilla. There it was, the moment they both had silently avoided for decades. Charles exhaled, slowly, leaning back in his chair. "Your mother had strong feelings. You know the past was complicated." William didn't flinch. "It's not the past I'm concerned about," he said. "It's the present. The influence she warned me about. It's here." The room tensed. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was dangerous. A father and son. A king and a future king. One holding on to the present. The other now holding the truth. Then, without a knock, the door opened. Camilla stepped inside, holding a file, expecting a routine update. She stopped cold when she saw the letter. Her eyes locked onto it. Then to William. Then to Charles. "What's going on?" she asked, but no one answered. No one needed to. The air had already changed, and whatever came next, the palace wouldn't be able to stop it. Because the moment that letter left Diana's hands, it was destined to reach this room. And now it had. The leak that rocked the monarchy. The morning after the confrontation, Clarence House felt different. Doors closed faster. Conversations became whispers. Something had shifted, and it wasn't just inside the family. It was out. Somewhere between that study and sunrise, the existence of the letter had leaked. It started small, a single post on an obscure online forum, claiming that William had discovered a sealed letter from Princess Diana, hidden in one of her private journals. The post barely made a ripple, until someone else added a detail. It names Camilla. That was all it took. Within hours, the post had been screenshotted and reposted across social media. Hashtags lit up like sparks in dry grass. #, DIANAS letter. #, what she said. #, truth from the grave. A popular royal gossip account hinted that tensions at Clarence House had reached boiling point, and that Camilla was at the center of it. By midday, palace staff were scrambling. William was furious, not because people knew, but because they knew the wrong way. The letter wasn't a tabloid headline. It was his mother's voice, and now it was being dissected without care. Worse, rumors twisted its meaning. People were inventing quotes Diana never wrote, adding their own speculation. It was spiraling. Camilla, meanwhile, was livid. She held a private meeting with senior aides, her tone icy and sharp. "This is an invasion of private family matters," she snapped. But those around her could tell this wasn't just anger. It was fear. Fear of what people might learn. Fear that the narrative she'd rebuilt for 2 decades might unravel in a matter of hours. At Buckingham Palace, the communications team tried to contain it. They drafted vague holding statements. No comment. Family correspondence remains private. But the more they said nothing, the more people assumed everything. One sentence, the one Diana actually wrote, began surfacing across media outlets. "Not everyone who smiles beside you wishes you well." That one line hit like thunder. It didn't name names. It didn't need to. By nightfall, the letter had become more than a private document. It was now a symbol of truth delayed, of love unprotected, of wounds never healed. And the pressure on William was growing. The question wasn't if he would speak, it was when and how, because silence was no longer protection. It was starting to feel like betrayal. And that's when Catherine reminded him of something simple and impossible to ignore. Pressure mounts and silence breaks. The palace was spinning. Advisors kept urging William to hold steady, to let the storm pass. "Give it a week," one said. "Distract with engagements. Make it disappear." But nothing about this felt like it could disappear. At home, William sat with the letter again, not to read it, but to feel it. The paper, the handwriting, the weight of it. His mother hadn't asked him to start a war. She'd asked him to stand in truth. And now the world was watching to see if he would. In that quiet moment, Catherine walked in, calm as always. She didn't say much. She just rested her hand on his shoulder and said, "Sunlight always finds its way in. Didn't your mother say that?" That was the shift. The idea of going public had crossed his mind from the beginning, but it had always felt dangerous, risky, unroyal. Now, though, it didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like responsibility. Later that night, William made a call. A friend. Someone outside the palace walls. Someone who had known Diana personally. He read a portion of the letter aloud over the phone. When he finished, there was a long pause on the other end. Then just 5 words. "Maybe this is the moment." William didn't sleep that night. He didn't need to. The decision had already settled in his chest like stone. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about scandal. It was about giving Diana back her voice, in his words, at the right time, and on his terms. He wasn't going to leak it. He wasn't going to let anyone else control the message. He would speak it himself, directly, clearly, publicly. And just like that, fate handed him the perfect stage. A charity gala already scheduled for the following week. Mental health, youth, the same causes Diana had once stood for, long before they were royal buzzwords. He told the palace. They tried to push back. They warned him it would be seen as a direct hit on Camilla, maybe even on the monarchy itself. But William didn't blink. "This isn't a hit. It's a truth, and I will not hide it. Because now, hiding it would be the real betrayal." The stage was set, and in just a few days, the crown was about to hear Diana speak again. The gala that changed royal history. The night arrived. cold, crisp, and calm. The kind of evening that always made headlines feel louder and smiles look sharper. A royal charity gala, scheduled long before any of this, suddenly became the most anticipated event of the year. Every seat filled, every camera focused, every whisper floating above silverware and crystal. But no one really came for the cause. They came for William. He entered quietly, Catherine at his side, her emerald gown trailing like a shadow of calm. The letter was tucked in the inner pocket of his jacket, pressed flat, as if the truth itself had weight. His expression didn't give anything away, but Catherine knew. She had seen him practicing at night, not to memorize it, but to prepare to feel it out loud. The evening moved slowly, speeches, awards, polite laughter, but the tension grew with every passing minute. When the host finally called William to the stage, the applause felt different. Not routine, but expectant. The air shifted. He approached the podium and paused, adjusted the mic, looked out at the crowd. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded paper. Not just any paper, the letter. "I want to share something personal," he said, his voice low but steady. "Something my mother left for me, and something I believe is meant to be heard. Now." Silence. Not a cough. Not a fork clink. The letter opened. The weight fell. "My darling William, if you are reading this, then my instincts were right. The truth could not be kept from you forever." He read it all. Her words about palace life as performance, about charm as a mask, about Camilla, not by name, but in essence. The shadows, the pressure, the quiet betrayals, the warnings. When he reached the final line, "Not everyone who smiles beside you wishes you well," the room held its breath. Then a single clap. Then another. Then a wave of applause, deep and unfiltered. Not royal protocol. Not duty. Approval. William folded the letter carefully and stepped back. No tears, no speech. Just truth, finally spoken. He had broken no law, made no accusations. But in doing the simplest thing, reading his mother's words, he'd just redrawn the lines inside the monarchy. And the reaction outside those gilded walls was about to be even louder. A nation reacts, a queen retreats. By morning, it was everywhere. Clips of William reading the letter had gone viral overnight. Broadcast, reposted, dissected, translated. It wasn't just a story. It was a moment. One that cut through generations of silence and carefully managed tradition. Newspapers ran full-page covers. "The Prince speaks. Diana is heard." "The letter that shook the crown." "Queen Camilla. Now what?" Crowds gathered outside Kensington Palace, leaving flowers once again beneath the gates, not for mourning, but in solidarity. Some held signs that read, "We heard you, William." Others simply held photos of Diana. Camilla, meanwhile, disappeared. No scheduled events, no statements, no press photos. She canceled a royal engagement, then another. Her absence only made the noise louder. Commentators didn't hold back. The question was everywhere. Can she still hold her place after this? And the numbers made it worse. A new poll showed a dramatic shift. Over 60% of the public believed Camilla should step back from royal duties. Another poll showed William's approval rating at its highest since Diana's funeral. Behind palace walls, panic grew. Advisors debated the unthinkable. What if the monarchy's survival now depended on distancing itself from its own queen? Camilla's aides urged her to issue a soft response, something measured. But she refused. According to one source, she said quietly, "There is no statement that can undo that letter." Inside, even Charles struggled. He wasn't just a king, he was a father, a husband, and a man caught between love and legacy. Publicly defending Camilla risked backlash. Staying silent risked looking guilty. But the truth was clear. Diana's words had done something no documentary, no interview, no book ever could. They changed the tide, and Camilla could feel it. Her decades-long image rebuild was unraveling, not from scandal, but from a letter that had waited patiently in silence for its time. That time had come, and now the palace had only one question left to answer. How does a queen survive when the people have already chosen sides? The fall of Queen Camilla. Inside the palace, everything was breaking, not loudly, not all at once, but in quiet steps. One meeting at a time, one unreadable stare at a time. Camilla was no longer just under scrutiny, she was under pressure. And this time, even the crown couldn't protect her. Behind closed doors, senior aides met with King Charles. Their message was simple. The monarchy can't afford this storm. The letter had touched something deep in the public. Not scandal, but emotion. Real, raw, generational grief. Diana's voice hadn't just resurfaced, it had reclaimed power. Meanwhile, William said little. He wasn't calling for resignations, he wasn't fueling the fire. He just stood by the one thing that couldn't be denied. I will not dilute her words. In another room, Camilla sat quietly. There was no dramatic outburst, just the slow realization that the tide wasn't turning. It had already turned. One source said she looked at her chief of staff and asked, "You're asking me to leave, aren't you?" The response wasn't recorded. It didn't need to be. Later that afternoon, the official statement was released. Her Majesty Queen Camilla will be stepping back from public duties indefinitely to support His Majesty in private. No mention of the letter, no mention of Diana. But the silence said everything. The headlines didn't hold back. Queen no more? Camilla steps aside after letter fallout. William's moment? Camilla's exit. People gathered outside Buckingham Palace, not in protest, not in celebration, but in reflection. Many brought photos of Diana. Some cried. Others stood still, letting the weight of history settle into the air. This wasn't just a royal retreat. It was a reckoning. And for William, it wasn't a victory. It was the cost of truth. Because while the country debated what Camilla's departure meant for the monarchy, he knew exactly what came next. The letter that rewrote the crown. The palace was quieter now. No more headlines, no more flashing cameras, just a strange, unsettled stillness, like the air after a storm that changed the landscape. William sat alone in his study once again. The envelope was open. The letter unfolded. But this time, it didn't feel like a message. It felt like a marker. The line between before and after. He read it one last time, then, gently, he placed it into a protective case. Not to hide it, to preserve it. Because this letter wasn't just his. It belonged to something bigger now. To history. Truth doesn't ask for applause, Diana had written. It only asks not to be buried. That truth had made its way through 28 years of silence, grief, and royal theater to land exactly where she meant it to, in her son's hands, in front of the world, at the moment it mattered most. A royal historian would later call it the moment the monarchy finally looked in the mirror. Not because William attacked it, but because he refused to protect a lie. Camilla's departure wasn't just about public image. It was about accountability. Quiet, overdue, undeniable. William hadn't shouted, he hadn't accused. He simply chose to listen to his mother and let the world do the rest. Legacy is not marble or gold, Diana had written. It's love. Protecting what cannot defend itself. And that's what this had been, from beginning to end. Not a scandal, not a takedown, but a son choosing love over silence. And now, the monarchy would never be the same. Because once truth speaks, the crown has to listen. Camilla is out. Diana's truth is in. And Prince William has drawn the line between silence and legacy. One letter rewrote royal history, not with anger, but with courage. As the palace scrambles, one thing is clear. The crown can't bury the past anymore. Diana's voice has finally been heard.